Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question which I'm going to flip in for you guys here, and he's basically saying, look, I know you actually like Dr. Mike Rizzutel's work. Dr. Mike likes to recommend that people change some of their major exercises every 3 mesocycles, and you like to see people do the same exercises for really long periods of time. So what do you think about this? Because he's talking about it to avoid like staleness through just excessive adaptation where you stop adapting to an exercise. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing and let's talk about this a little bit. All right, kind of a complex topic. This is going to go a little deep. So let's try to bring it down into layman's terms though for people. All right, because you guys know, it's like I said the other day, even for aesthetics, doing the same exercise for long periods of time and getting better and better at it over long periods of time is more likely to give you muscle growth because you're not going through all these new motor learning and adaptation processes when you switch exercises too frequently. Now, this can be tricky when we're talking about switching them, and what people need to think about here, when you look at what he's talking about mesocycles, you guys go do some basic Googling on mesocycles. Mesocycles can vary in time down to 2 weeks or sometimes several months as a mesocycle, but they're generally about a month. So when you're talking about 3 mesocycles is averaging about every 3 months. That's basically 12 weeks, guys. Changing some of your major exercises every 12 weeks. Well, any exercise that's worth doing, you're going to be doing twice a week or more anyways, right? No one who understands training is recommending bro splits. No one with a background in physiology is telling people to do bro splits where you do an exercise or a body part only once a week. So you're talking about at least twice a week for 12 weeks. That is 24 workouts for a given body part or movement pattern where you're doing the same exercise and progressing on it for 24 times in a row. That is a lot of workouts. And if you're doing full body 3 days a week, that's 36 times. So let's say you've chosen the bench press as an exercise there. You've done 36 bench press workouts in a row with that as a primary chest exercise. That is a long period of time. Now, and it's not as simple as just the adaptation there, because I'll get into kind of leaving them there and not changing exercises so much in a minute. But you guys note that when I've given you guys like my intermediate off-season athlete program, which is a program I put out, it's one of my less popular ones because it's for more advanced people who have very serious goals. All right, it's not going to be as popular as either of my novice type routines. I actually have 3 basic novice routines. It's just my most common one is the 5x5, which has been run by at least 25,000 people. So when you look at that, I've said in that one that at the end of each basically full cycle of the program, if you wanted to change to a different exercise variation, you can do so. All right, so I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Dr. Mike there with what I'm saying, because I've said that for that particular program even. You could change them. But that's an intermediate. Mike is also giving advice to people who are more intermediate. So a lot of college level athletes, a lot of competitive athletes. Those are the people who are listening to Dr. Mike. Dr. Mike's not writing that many novice programs. He's not putting stuff out for beginners. So let's talk about that from that perspective. And I've said that if people want to do that, they can change it. However, what have I said to people? If you're going to change it, let's say you're going to change the back squat out for the front squat, or you're going to change the flat bench to a shallow incline bench, or change the flat bench to a floor press. You've basically run the bench for 12 weeks straight, and I've said if you want to change them, I want you to spend a full week coming in and relearning that exercise before you test the max on it. Why? Because the first 2 or 3 workouts in which you perform an exercise, you are not able to recruit maximal muscle fibers on it, right? You're learning the motor patterns on it. You're going to be weaker at it, and people again are like, yeah, but if I went to failure, I got all the muscle fibers, right? No, not necessarily. You would be able to recruit a lot more muscle fibers more effectively if you've learned the motor pattern. So I would like to see people come in and do 2 or 3 workouts in a row with a weight where they don't go to failure, a modest weight, you know, something like 8, 10 reps or whatever for a few sets. on that new exercise with even 50 or 60% of your max so that you're not getting fatigued. You're going to need a changeover week. If you're going to change exercises, you're going to need a week or so to come in and perform the new exercises to learn the motor pattern. Because otherwise you don't have a baseline maximum weight established to build off of, right? You have no way to determine how strong you're really supposed to be on it. So if you just change to a new exercise and go straight into a structured program on an exercise, you don't have a true current max determined, you're going to shortchange all of your weights. You're going to be using 10, 15% less weight than you're supposed to use all the way through. You're going to struggle to calculate it, and you're not going to make the gains that you want when you go into another 12-week block. So it is going to add a week between changes, and that's fine. If you feel like you're stale on that exercise and you want to run a different one for a slightly different variation, that's fine. But again, this would still be taking Dr. Mike's advice. But what you would be doing is spending a week learning the exercise, and then you run the full 12-week program with the new exercise added in after you've established the basic technique and motor pattern so you can do it correctly and progress on it. But then you're doing that exercise in a structured format for 12 weeks straight, twice a week, 24 workouts basically. And then you're testing, seeing where you're at again on it. But again, when you're switching exercises like that, you can totally do that. That's fine. There's no problem with that on your big movements, but you need to run them for a long period of time and not be flip-flopping. It's when you run into problems when you change them too frequently, you have to relearn them. But on these, again, you're going to have to learn the basic exercise before you can do a proper progression or analyze where you're supposed to be on it. If you're going to run a structured periodized program, which is the sort of stuff that he would be writing. And people need to understand the difference. And you know what the thing is, this isn't necessary. When we talk about making these changes like this, because you've had some exercise staleness or you've completely adapted to that exercise after 12 weeks of hard progression on an exercise you already have the movement patterns down on, okay, fine. But you need to understand, this is sort of stuff that we're giving advice on there is for people who have very serious goals in which 0.5% or a 1% difference in your progress could make the difference between getting a scholarship, keeping your scholarship, turning professional, could be the difference between first place and seventh place in a competition. All right, we're talking about getting little small advantages. It's when you talk about doing something like that, we are talking about very tiny potential advantages. If you enjoy doing the weighted dip as your primary chest exercise, you don't have to change that out. If you're just trying to get big and strong and be in shape because you look impressive or you want to be strong or you want the health benefits or whatever you're trying to do, trying to change stuff up to lifts that you don't like as much and you don't enjoy as much may not be useful because you're trying to get a 0.5% advantage. So if you like doing the weighted dip and you enjoy it and you're good at it, don't change it. You don't need to change that. If you're not in a competitive environment where the 0.5% difference means the difference between winning and losing. All right, in a competitive environment, a 0.5% difference could cost you $1 million. That's what you're talking about with saying, okay, I'm going to do something like this to gain a small advantage because I've adapted a lot to this. There's no reason you can't grow for 5 years straight off the weighted dip just fine instead of the bench press, or the bench press instead of the weighted dip. They're both amazing chest and tricep exercises. They're both exercises that use a lot of muscle in the body. They put a lot of muscle and strength on you. You don't have to change these exercises just because you can. Meaning the advantage of changing something like that, and I know he's a big fan of it, and I agree, in the right environment, when you're trying to push an athlete to the absolute limits, changing an exercise on them every 12 weeks, as long as they're not taking their competitive lifts out. Now, if they're an Olympic lifter or power lifter, this is not an option. All right, this shouldn't be an option. But if it's not a lift that they compete with itself, and it's just sport specific or it's size specific, because they're bodybuilding, whatever it happens to be, yeah, I understand that. They're trying to chase a 0.5% advantage, a little edge in a competitive environment by switching the exercise. They go through a new adaptation process, and they might get a little better progression with a new movement pattern once they establish the baseline on how to perform it. All right, and I get that. There can be a very, very small edge to doing that every 12 weeks or so. But there's a big difference between talking about changing something like that every 12 weeks versus the guys who every week, oh, I'm going to go from bench press this week, weighted dip this week, oh, I'm going to do incline for 2 weeks instead. That is when you run into problems of not being able to properly track your progression. That's the guys who actually end up gaining less muscle and strength over the course of a year because they're changing too frequently. You got to remember with something like this, at most, you're only changing the main exercises through the course of a year 3 times. You're only changing it 3 times in a year under this type of recommendation. And honestly, I don't think it's unreasonable, and I get where he's coming from when he says that, particularly in a competitive environment where that little bit of new adaptation could yield someone a 0.5% advantage here or there. And a 0.5% advantage for competitive athletes is a really, really big deal. And if you can do something that's going to give you a 0.25% or 0.5% edge and you compete, hell yeah, you should consider it. Oh, absolutely, because 0.5% are the difference between winners and losers. 0.5% is the difference between a champion and the guys who don't make the cut. But for everyone else, a 0.5% isn't something you're going to notice in the mirror. It's not something you're going to notice a difference in how you feel, and it's probably not going to noticeably affect how much weight you're putting on the bar. So understand that's an apples to oranges comparison here. Most guys who aren't serious competitors, 0.5% advantages aren't worth chasing because the rest of their lifestyle isn't geared around gaining all the advantages either. Those same people, if they're not ultra serious like that, there's usually 3 or 4 other things they could change in their lifestyle that are worth a 10% difference, a 20% difference. And they don't bother to do those things, so chasing a little 0.5% difference probably doesn't matter. There's different things they could probably change in their life that would do more, like adding an extra squat session every week. For a lot of those guys, more muscle on them. Getting an extra 30 minutes sleep, finding a way to get a power nap every day would probably do more for them, for their gains and their recovery than an exercise change every 12 weeks would. Just kind of throwing that out there. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.